Hey everybody.
I suppose we have two dominant ideas about what happens to us when we die. There's the old-fashioned idea
Hey everybody.
that after we
So
die we go to another world.
I'm
I
got my new
suppose
mic, got it set up.
on a date we don't know what the answer to this is.
Hopefully you can hear me a lot better than before. So I have decided to work on a different project tonight. Figure I'm gonna start trying to, like I was talking about before, I've got a list of projects I want to start building. So this is going to be kind of the first, just kind of seeing how this is going to go, what all I need to do to get this set up. Obviously it's going to be a little bit of a learning curve, getting everything set correctly, mic volume, and just be able to make sure I produce good content for you guys. I was just going to build something really simple tonight. It shouldn't take very long to get this set up, and it should be pretty simple and fun. It's just an infinite scroll. So I don't think I did have a complete example already built that I was going to show you basically what we would be building, but for now it's not a big deal. We'll just in my next videos I'll try to make sure I have everything already built, kind of give you a demonstration to begin with, and then jump into building it. But for tonight it's just going to be building this infinite scroll system out, and should be pretty fun, pretty easy. Don't mean to repeat myself here, so I guess we'll just jump right into it. And I got over here, I just was playing around with a static value. Just if you're not familiar with what a static variable is and how it works, I can just show you that real quick. Not that it really has anything to pertain to what we're really doing, although we will use a static value, but it's not really important to really understand that right away if you're new to it. But basically it's just test static, and what's going on here is just setting a static value, a equals 0, and then just echo out that value, and then we're going to count it up every time. And then if a is less than 15, we're just going to run this function again, and being it's a static value, it's going to stay, it's not going to stay 0. So anytime we count up and we run this function again, a is going to equal the new value. And we just execute this function outside of it, and if you can see over here in the browser, you can see it's just going to, well, maybe, oh, I didn't save it. It's just going to count up to 15, or well, up to 14, but counting 0 is 15 values. So anyway, doesn't really have anything to pertain to what we're doing tonight, but just figure I'll show you that real quick. Anyway, we can go back over here to our editor and delete this. And if you guys aren't already have your editor open and ready to go, need a cup of coffee or whatever you need, go ahead and get that going, and then we'll jump right into it. Alright, so I'll turn my music down on my side a little bit here so it doesn't drown me out. Hopefully it's not too loud for you guys. I'll cut it back just a little bit. I like to have a little bit of music in the background. It helps me. So to begin with, we're just going to basically create a basic index PHP file. Pretty straightforward. It's just going to basically contain some HTML, and this is what's going to load all of our information into. And so to begin with, we just need to grab some jQuery. We'll need jQuery for this, and that's real simple to grab. And we can just go to jQuery. There's plenty of CDNs out there, so you can just probably Google jQuery CDN, and I just did a quick Google search, and this one here, and we're going to use 3. So you can use minified, slim version, or slim minified. You just use the minified version, or uncompressed if you like. So you can just select that and basically just copy this, and then once we have that, we just come over here to our index.php file, and we'll just place this right here at the end of our page. Yep. Said it was copied to clipboard, but apparently it was not. So there's that. And then aside from that, really only thing else that's going to be in this page is going to be a couple divs. We'll just start by creating a div, and this is basically going to hold our content once we start pulling it from the database. And we can go ahead and create a class, and we'll just call it container. And then inside this div, we're gonna create another div, and this is where actually the content's gonna actually be loaded, is inside this, and we'll just label this content. So the container is just gonna be a wrap for that, just gonna kind of hold all of that inside, and then just give it an ID of content. And I already have some styling created for this. It's nothing special, but just kind of helps make it display a little better. You can change your styling to display it however you like, but for now we'll just leave it like this. The next thing we need to do is we need to have a database for all of our content to reside, because that's what we're going to do. We're going to connect to a MySQL database and pull information. So basically, if you had like a blog or like Twitter or Facebook, where it's an infinite scroll, where you just scroll down and it just keeps loading more and more posts, that's essentially the same thing as what we're going to be doing. So if we go over to, I already have the table created, but we'll go ahead and log into that, and I think let me log into it real quick. Infinite scroll. Scroll. So just log into databases, and infinite scroll, and let me switch over to that real quick for you guys. Okay, so here's the database, and I'll upload all of this stuff to GitHub so you guys can download it from there to follow along. So once I'm done with this, I'll upload all of this to GitHub, and I'll leave a link to that in there. So we're just going to have one table, and it's going to be called posts. You can just create a table, pretty easy. Just down here, just click create table, and you just create a table named post, and that post is going to just have these 3 columns in it, so ID, content, and date. So if you come here and you just create table post, and I'll just create a new one, and call it we'll just call it post 2. Well, like I said, we're only going to need 3 columns for it, and you have ID, post, and date. So this is going to hold the post content. This is going to be the date. So we can do date time, and then this one here, it could just be a text field. This one's going to be an integer, and then we're going to index with that one. So we'll just select primary, click go, and auto increment. It needs to be auto incrementing, and then our text field and date time should be just the same. And I'll double check that on the date time. It should be correct, but post structure, I think, okay, I use an integer for this one, so you can change that to integer on the post one. Structure, change, or you can leave it date time. Either one will work fine. But so integer, set 11, and that should work. So ID, post, and date. Like I said, I already have one that's already has a bunch of data in it for the purpose of this tutorial. And so we could I'm just going to drop this other one because I don't need it. And then back over to our editor, we're going to create another file. Now, I've already created it. And just create file name connection.php or con.php, and just start off with a PHP tag. And in this file is where we're going to create our database connection. So this is where we're just going to create a class that we'll use for our script for pulling data from the database. So this would basically just be our method for connecting to the database. We'll start by creating a class. It's going to be PDO connection or PDO con, and then we're going to create a couple values up here. The first one's just going to be static. It's going to be PDO, and the next one's going to be private, and it's going to be DSN. And then we're going to create another one. It's going to be for user. So these are all going to hold our connection values essentially. So we'll be able to pass these into there. This next one's going to be password, and that should be it. So we just have PDO, which is going to hold the actual connection. So once we open a connection to the database, this value is going to hold that. And then these three items are going to basically contain our user and password for logging into the database, and this is going to actually contain the information that's needed for what database essentially that we're going to connect to, and what type of database. So below that, we're just going to create another function, and it's just going to be a constructor function. That this function gets ran every time that this class is created. And in the construction, we're just going to we'll be able to pass in some values. So host, DB name, so database name, and user, and password. And then down below here, we're just going to assign these values that we pass in. Now, granted, you typically would want to do, some checking on these values, but just for the purpose of this simple tutorial, we're not going to worry about all that. We're just going to show you just how this kind of works, just the basics of it. So we're just going to create, I'm going to say MySQL, and then host equals, and then we're going to say host, and then we need to create a semicolon because that's going to be the end of that statement, and then DB name equals, and it's going to be DB name, and that's it for that. So that's what the DSN is. So MySQL is basically the connector type, and then the host, what host we're going to connect to, and then the database name that we're going to connect, be sending and receiving data to. And this user is going to obviously be user, and this password is going to be pass. So we're using all these: host, database name, user, and password. Host, database, user, and pass. Okay, and that's it for the constructor. We really don't need anything else there. And then the next function we need to create is just going to be public function. And this is going to be connect. And this is what we're going to actually use to connect with. So we're just going to create a try-catch block. And so this way, if it fails, we can catch the error and display that error, whatever the error might be. So here we're just going to say this PDO equals a new PDO, And in here we're just going to pass in the values that we've passed in once we initiated this object. So this DSN, this user, and this password. Hopefully this is all making sense. So essentially what we're going to do is whenever we initiate this, so if we were to in another script, and you'll see here after a bit, but we just do PDO equals new PDO connection, and then we can do, you know, a PDO new PDO connect, and then we can just connect. Obviously we're going to have to pass in our values here, whatever our connection values are for host, database name, everything else. I'll show you here in just a minute once we kind of finish up with this. We have one more thing we need to do, and for that is to basically display if there's an error message, if it doesn't connect for some reason, you know, whether or not we pass in the wrong username or wrong table name or any of those things, we'll be able to it'll let us know. So PDO equals, we'll create a string that's going to say connection error, and we'll say that the error is going to be, and if we do this, depending on your IDE, it might give you a list of things. You can get code, get file, get line. The one we want is get message, so whatever the message is. Excuse me. So that should be it for this. So we can just save this file, and then the next file that we probably need to work on is going to be the API file, and that's going to be the file that we're going to be able to pass values to. And so we can just come here and just create a new file, a new PHP file, and we'll just call it api.php, and this just be a simple file that will basically use our PHP PDO connection file, and will allow us to connect to the database. And then also, once we create the JavaScript file, that will pull more posts from the database and load those to the user. So to begin with, we just need to include that that PDO or the connection file. So just do connection PHP, and then we'll just include that, and then we'll just create a variable, and we'll say new, and it's just going to be PDO connection, and then you'll need to pass in your host name. So if you're on localhost, it's just going to be localhost, and then you're going to need to pass in the database name, username, and password. So for me, it's infinite scroll, and then the username and password. And I don't remember what I used as the username and password, so I'm going to check in my database and see what I know what it is now. It's just made it really simple. So simple I couldn't remember it. Twitch, TWITC, Twitch, and the password was hello. Pretty simple. So that's that. So that should get us connected, and then we'll just come down here and PDO, and we'll just say connect, and we should be able to, it should connect, and if we just do a var dump of this of PDO, actually var dump, if we just do var dump PDO, and we'll come over here and load our index page. Let's see, we'll have to actually include that in here. We'll have to include the API PHP file inside of this in order to have that loaded. So we'll just include that. Now when we use our JavaScript file, we won't be including this file, but for now we're just going to test it out and make sure that's working. We could just go to API PHP in the browser and it should do the same thing, but we're just going to include this. We're just going to include API.php here, and if all goes well, I'll switch back over to the browser. So as you can see, it was able to PDO connection, private, MySQL host, and PDO connection error. So we have a connection error. So it did not connect, and I see why it didn't connect, and that's because I didn't pass in the correct values over here. So if I change that back, infinite scroll, nope. What else is scroll? SCROLL Twitch, hello, local host, infinite. Oh, I better check and make sure. Infinite scroll, SCROLL Twitch, TWITCH, hello. Well, try the other user and see. Nope. Oh, see, I left out an L on the local host, so that would probably do it. So there we go. Now it's connected. Okay. So that should take care of that. So now it's connected, and we don't see any errors. Alright, so I'm going to switch back. So yeah, I left the L off of local host, and I had infinite. I left the E off of infinite. So now we just delete that that var dump, and we should be good to go on that. So as long as everything's working okay on your end, it's connecting, then you should be good to go. So the next thing that we need to do is just create another class, and this class is going to handle our connection from our JavaScript file, and it's just going to be class, and it's going to be infinite scroll, and it's going to be, if I can type, and then we're just going to create another variable up here at the top, and it's going to be private PDO, and then we're going to create our constructor function. And again, the constructor function, it gets ran every time that this object is created. So public function, it's just 2 underscores construct, and we're going to pass in PDO to this. So essentially, if you kind of follow along, you can kind of see what's happening here. We're going to pass in, we're going to assign PDO equals PDO. So when we create this object, we're going to pass in the PDO function, and or the PDO object, and that will allow this object to use our connection. So the next thing we need to do is create a public function. And it's going to be get items, because we need to retrieve items from the database. And get items, and that's going to be, and then we're going to need to pass in how many items we want, and then where, what the offset's going to be, because how many items do we want to pull at one time, and then also from what point in the database do we want to pull those items. So we want quantity, and then offset, and as always, I like to always set a variable at the top just as response equals, and this isn't absolutely necessary, but and then we're going to create a query string that we're going to use to query our database, and this is going to contain the query string, and that query string is going to be it's going to just be select, and we're going to select the items that we want from the database, and we have ID, content, and date, or post, whatever you label that, and date, and then we're going to say from post, and we're going to say order by, and we're going to order it by the ID. So this way, because the ID, you remember, is auto incrementing, and so every time that a new row is added, it's just going to count up. So we're going to order it by that, and then we're going to say ascending in the ascending order, and we're going to limit it, because remember we're passing in a quantity and an offset, so we need to pass in a limit, and then so it's going to be quantity, and we're using binding parameters, so that's how we do that with the QTY, and then offset. And remember, our offset is going to be I'll just say offset, and that should be it for that. And then below here, we're just going to create another try-catch block, and in that try-catch block is where we're going to actually connect to the database, pass in these values here, the quantity and the offset, and create pull the information from the database. So to do that, we'll just create a handler for this variable called statement. That's going to equal this PDO prepare. We're going to prepare the query statement, and that query, so just pass in query, our query string, and then the next thing we need to do is create we need to bind our parameters. So the parameters that we pass in, we need to bind those to match what we used up here. So these could be different. These don't have to necessarily represent these, because that's what this is where this is gonna come in. So bind parameter, and it's going to be quantity, because this is what we used up there. So it's just going to be QTY, and and then we'll just pass in quantity, and we need to say PDO, and it needs to be the type, the variable type that we're passing in. In this case, it's going to be param int, because it's going to be an integer, because our quantity is going to be an integer. So we need to let it know that that's what kind of value is going to be passed in. And we're just going to copy and paste that. And this is just going to be offset. This is going to be offset, and this one here is going to be an integer as well, because the offset's going to how many, so if we wanted to pull from the 11th value, or 11th row, we're just going to pass in 11, so, and how many we want, starting from there, from that point. Then we'll do statement, execute, and that's it for that. Now we need to iterate over those. We'll just say while, we'll just use a while loop, and we'll say while row equals a statement. We'll say fetch, and we're going to fetch it as an object. So again, PDO, and we'll just say fetch, and we can just say fetch object. So we can fetch number, names, lazy, key pair. We're just going to use the fetch object, and while we'll do that, we'll just say that response is going to equal an array, and that array is going to equal the row. So row is going to equal whatever we fetch from there, and we're just going to pass that in. So if we have 10 results, it's just going to pass all that into this array. And we'll just say statement equals null, and this will basically clear this. This will basically unload that variable, so it doesn't. So the next time we go to pass in a value, it won't. equal anything, which isn't necessarily necessary. There's other ways of doing that, but just for the purpose of this simple example, that's how we're going to do it. So E equals get message, and this way, if there's a message, this will we'll get that returned to us. So if there's an error pulling that information, we'll get that message back. So return, we're just going to return the response now. So the response should either equal this message or the data fetched from the database. Alright, so the next thing, that's pretty much it for the object. So the next thing we need to do is we need to grab the values that we pass in. So quantity equals is set, and we're just going to check to make sure that those values are set, and we're going to use post. So we just say post, and we're going to say items is set, and we're just going to do shorthand rather than doing an if block. We're just going to use a shorthand syntax, and it's just going to say post items, and items. And if not, then we're just going to say it's 1. So quantity, so if post items is set, then it will equal whatever's in the post value. If not, it's just going to equal 1. So this way it kind of avoids having an empty value there, because we're not doing any checking up here. And like I said, typically you'd want to check, but just for simplicity's sake, we don't. We're not. We don't need to do all that. So this here is just going to be offset. So for our offset, and again offset, and then that should be the only 2 values that we need. The next thing we'll have to do is pass those values into the object that we just created, and then return that back to our JavaScript file. So to do that, we're just going to create a variable called is for infinite scroll equals, and we're just going to say new infinite scroll, and we're going to pass in we need to pass in our PDO connection. So remember, whenever we load this, we can pass in a value, and we're going to pass in our PDO connection that we created up here. So to do that, we just say this PDO, so that will pass in our PDO connection, and then we'll just say data equals is get items, and quantity and offset. So we just say offset. So we're just going to pass in these 2 values here into our object, and then lastly is we just need to echo this back out, and we need to use JSON encode, and then we'll encode the data, and then that should give us what we need for our script. And we should be able to test this out and see if it's working if we save this. And I think, do we still have this in our let's see here, API? Yeah, we still have the API included in our index file, and that's this file here. So now that that's included, excuse me, we should be able to reload this page, and it should, if all goes well, pull information if there's any data in the database. If not, and no, it didn't work. So what did we do wrong? Let's take a look and see. So echo JSON encode, and what I like to do is I like to just do this. If I run into an issue, I just do var dump, and this way it just kind of gives me a little bit better idea of what is actually there. bar dump, and switch back over, and nothing. So we're not getting anything. And items, so we're pulling one item in our infinite scroll, we're passing in the PDO connection. We've included it, localhost, PDO connect, and let's take a look and see why this might not be working. This PDO, get items, quantity items, offset, so select ID, content, date from post, order by ID, that's all looks okay, this all looks alright. Get message, infinite scroll, passing in the connection, get items, let's see, API, include API, that should be okay. Yep. Data equals get items, quantity offset, text statement equals null out, so that really isn't needed. And we'll just, I'm just going to come over here. Oops, and okay. I have to always switch over between the thing. I wish I could do full screen and just show everything at once, but it won't let me. I have to select windows that have to be displayed in OBS for some reason. So get items, it doesn't even look like that's running. Let's take a look. Let's just do this. Echo. I'm just going to echo anything out. And that's running. So is set post items quantity and O set. So echo. This should be running. And infinite scroll. And that should be running this PDO. And we're just going to bar dump this and see. And that's not seeming to be working, so why not? I'm just going to echo something in the constructor and see. Nothing. Infinite. Did I spell it? Yeah, I should have thrown an error if not. Infinite scroll PDO, this PDO. Oh, that's the problem. Yeah, yep, okay, that's the problem. So, where the problem is I'm saying this PDO, and this PDO doesn't reference to anything because in the context, so it needs to be PDO and PDO. That's probably the issue there. So if I run this again, yes, now it's working. Okay, something simple. So as you can see, it's now pulling information from the database. So it's creating an array, and it looks like I have, for some reason, oh, because I have that going in the constructor, this little ASD right here. So I had that in the constructor, and so now that's working. So now it's returning an array to us that contains an object with our ID, with our information from our database. So it contains the ID, the content, that's for the first one, and then the date, and then ID and content somewhere in here. ID, oh yeah, content, and then the date. So it pulled two items from there, or excuse me, should only be one item, but it's displaying two items. Let's see, so items, post items. So if I come over here and we can just change this to how many items we want to say 10 items and offset 0. So starting at 0, and we're going to pull 10 items, and as you can see, it's now pulling an array of 10 items. I believe if I come back, yeah, 0. Okay. And oh, this echo JSON encode. I'm not sure. Okay. Oh, I know why. Okay, I see what I did. I left the var dump here, and I didn't need to do that, and that's why it was displaying 2 results instead of 1 result. It's not a big deal. So now it should, if I come here and I just do only 1 item, yeah, that's better. So now it's just displaying 1 item to us, and this is a JSON array that's being echoed out to us, and then it's containing all of that information that was returned from the database. And then if, like I said, we go back over here and we can change this to 10 items, and we can change the offset. So if we wanted to start from 10 and still only pull 10 results at a time, starting from the 10th item in the database. So when we start scrolling down, we'll need to have that offset to know how many results we need. So as you can see, it's if I switch back over, you can see it's pulling all of those results from the database, and you can tell because it says ID 11 here, because we started from the 10th one, so it's going to count from the very next one, which would be 11, and then count up from there for 10 items. So that should be pretty much it for that portion of it. So now we just need to switch over here and save that. Now the next thing that we need to create is our JavaScript file that's going to actually pull our content from the database, from the front end, from the user side, and it's going to connect to our API file, pass in our values through post, and then pull that data. So this should be pretty simple. So we'll just create a new file, and it's just going to be a JavaScript file, and you can name this whatever you like, and I'm just going to label it infinite scroll, so infinite scroll .js, and I'm just going to delete that. And to start with, we just need to basically we're just going to connect. We're just going to create the connection functionality. So we're just going to create an object that's going to that we'll be able to use upon scrolling to load our data. So to do that, we'll just come down here. We'll just create var and just label it infinite scroll equals, and it's going to equal an object, and our function, we're just going to create a function in here, and it's going to be load post, and that post load post, and then we're going to pass in quantity and offset. So inside this function, we're going to have we're going to say if wait, and this is how we're going to keep track. If wait equals true, or if wait is not true, I'm going to say wait equals true, and we're going to create a variable up here called wait, and that's going to equal false to begin with, and you'll see how this is going to work in just a minute. Now, if wait is not false, then wait equals true, and below that we just need to create an object that's going to be equal the values that we pass in here. So we're going to create an object that's going to contain these values, and we're going to use this object to pass in to our API script. It's going to be items and quantity. And I'm sorry if anybody's chatting in the chat room. I haven't really been paying a whole lot of attention to that, and I do apologize. I try to check it periodically, and I have somebody that is supposed to be kind of keeping an eye on that for me, just in case anybody comments in there, because it's kind of hard for me to be coding and keeping an eye on that at the same time. So I do apologize, and try to get this set up a little bit better to where I can monitor all that stuff at the same time. I have an extra computer actually that I need to use, that I could use to kind of help keep an eye on that. So anyway, so items, because remember items, so this value is just a key value pair, so items and quantity. So quantity is the value we're passing in here, and then items is the value that we're going to pass into the backside. That's going to be part of our post data. So in the API script here we have items, so that needs to represent that. And then the next one is going to be offset, and then that's going to be offset is the other value that's going to be passed in. The next thing we need to do is create an Ajax connection to our API, and then pass in our object, and then return the results and display those results to the user. So to do that, we just create an Ajax call here, and we just say URL, and the URL we're just going to say api.php. That's the script that we're going to connect to, and then what method that we're going to use, whether it's post or get, and we're using post. So we just say type equals post, and then data type, we'll specify the data type that we're passing in, data type, and that's going to be JSON. And then the data that we want to pass along with that post request is going to be data, and then what we want to do on a successful SUCCE on success. So on success, what do we want to do? We want to run a function, and in that function is pass data. Just say data, and or we could just say, we'll say response, so it just doesn't confuse between this and what we're getting here. So this here is going to be the response on success. So on success, we're going to run a function, and we're going to pass in the information that was received on success. So in here we're going to say if, we're going to create an if condition, and we'll say if response is not false, what do we want to do? And in here, this needs to be lowercase. If not false, then we're going to iterate over those results, because we're going to get, remember, we're going to get a JSON array. So we're going to do JSON encode. Our query is going to return an object, and we're going to return that object. We're going to use JSON encode to return that in as a JSON array, and so we need to iterate over that array. So to do that, we just do $each, and we just say response. The first parameter is going to be what you want to iterate over, what object or array that you want to iterate over, and then the second one is just going to be function, and we'll say index. Most people just use IE instead of spelling it all out. We can just do index, and we'll just say index and element, or index and value. It doesn't matter. It's just those two values. And then what we want to do with those is inside this function, we're going to take those and we're going to display those to the user. So we'll say var, and depending on what you did with your if you used a date time, or if you decided to use integer and store the date time that way, will make a difference as far as how the script's going to perform. So just kind of keep that in mind. Or excuse me, no, it won't matter. It won't make a difference, but just displaying it to the user. So being as I already have it set up with an integer, I'm going to use, I'm going to modify the date this way. So excuse me for that. So var date is just going to equal, it's going to be a new date function, and I'm going to say var date equals value dot date, and it's going to be times 1,000. And the next one is going to be var HTML equals nothing to start off with, and then we're just basically going to concatenate all of our HTML into this, and then we're going to take that HTML, that one HTML variable, and display it. So we'll say var HTML equals nothing, and then we'll say HTML equals HTML plus, and then we're just going to create some HTML elements that are going to contain all of our post content, so our date and whatever is contained within the post. So we'll just create a div. I'm just going to create a div class. You guys can do this however you want as far as this goes. It's not going to be too, I mean, it will make a little bit of difference if you guys change it up a little bit because of how we'll be pulling the data. So you just have to kind of pay attention to that. So whenever we get to the last element on the page, we need to be able to identify that last element on the page, find it, and retrieve the ID from that element, and use that ID to pass back into the API to pull more data. So just kind of keep that in mind. So it may make sense if you're not real sure to just go ahead and just kind of follow along exactly as I got it wrote here. So content, this is just going to be content, and post, and the next one, so I'm just going to kind of copy and paste a little bit, so this make this a little quicker. So this next one, oh, I guess I don't need a div here. This is actually, we just need a closing div, and in between here, I'm just going to do this to, so we just say HTML. I didn't really make it quicker. I probably typed it out as quickly. Okay, so anyway, so input, so this is going to be input, and it's going to be a class, and this is going to hold, this is going to be a hidden input, and it's going to hold our post ID because we don't necessarily need to display that to the user. We're just going to need this for retrieving more posts. So this is going to be class, and it's going to be content, hidden post ID, and then it's going to be type, like I said, type equals hidden, and its value is going to equal, the value is going to be the ID, and to do that we just do this, and it's going to be response.id, and then the next thing we need to create is a couple elements to contain our post content. And if you want to display the ID and the ID, the content, and the date, if you want to display those items, which is what I'm going to do. So I'm just going to say span. I'm just going to create a span. I'm just going to do 3 of these that are going to contain. The first one's going to contain the ID. So this is just going to be, I'm just going to give this a class so I can style this. So it's going to be content, post, ID, and the next one is going to have a class. It's going to be equal to, it's going to be content, post, text, and the next one's going to be date. So I'm just going to, some things I don't have to write that out, so post. This is going to be date. And then inside of each of these, all we need to do is create, just add these in here. So response, the ID, and let's do this. Response ID, and this one here is going to be content, and then the next one is going to be date. Date. And actually, this one here just needs to be date for me, because I basically got the date as an integer, so just a Unix timestamp. So I'm going to pass it in as, or as what I'm storing it as. And we're not going to do the submitting new post or anything. We're just going to basically just create a bunch of dummy text, and you can just go to like lorem ipsum and just get some paragraph text and just add several rows, 15 or 20 rows, and with some dummy text just to see how this works. That's what I did. How I did it, I just grabbed a bunch of dummy text and stuck in there, and I think that should be about everything. So we have our hidden input that we're going to use to retrieve our ID from, and then we have the ID, the text, and the date that we're going to display on the page. And then the next thing we need to do is actually display it. So we just do that by, we're going to say append, because remember we're iterating over these. So each response, so for each one of each item that's in that response, this is what we're going to do with it. We're going to create basically an HTML piece, and then we're just going to append it to the page. So we're just going to append HTML, and we're going to append it to the content tag, or div, that we created earlier inside of our index.php file.
Roman.
And
Roman, come eat, buddy.
that should be pretty much it for the load post. Let's see.
Roman.
For now, I mean this should pretty much work as is. To go ahead and start pulling posts, and it will append them, except we won't have any scroll functionality. So on scroll, we're not going to actually be pulling more posts. If we could just load this as is, and it would pull some posts, whatever we have set as a default. We'd have to pass in a quantity and an offset, and it should go ahead and work. And we could test that out, and pretty easily we can just come down here, and we'll just say what we named our infinite scroll. So we just say infinite scroll dot load post, and then we just pass in a quantity, and we just say 10, and an offset of 0. So starting from the beginning, and we'll just load 10 posts, and that should work. We need to load this script file in our page, and to do that, we just come down here below. We need to make sure we add it below our jQuery here so it will work. So we come here and we'll just script, and we'll say source equals, and it's just going to be infinite scroll.js, and that should really be all that is needed, and it should work. If not, you may need to add type equals, and it should be text JavaScript, and that should work. So it should load our script, and then anything we have in there, we should be, and we won't need this. We don't need to include this in here anymore. So we just delete that, and so that should work for that. So let's see. Let's just double check content. So we're gonna load this data and display it inside of the content div here, and see if everything looks okay. I guess we'll know as soon as we test it here real quick and see what happens. So it should be everything that we need. So if we come back over the browser and we just check and see what happens. And yeah, so it loaded it. So undefined, so we have a couple. So we do have one issue. It did pull the date, as you can see, because it's 29, so that's all working, but undefined. So we need to check our script and see what's undefined. But it did pull the first 10 results. So kind of 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 results. And we back over here to the script and just see what we did wrong. So response.id, response.content, and then date. So the response ID is not correct. And let's see, ID, content, and date. Response.id, response.content. Oh, I see why. Okay, so this, instead of being response, this needs to be value.id and value.content. So we'll come back over here and reload our page. That should work. Yep, okay, perfect. So we have 1, and then 2 somewhere in there in the midst of all this. Potentially, yeah, 2, and 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, and 10. Okay, perfect. So it loaded our 10 results. And just to double check this, let's come back over here to our script, and let's pass in. Let's start it from 10, and come back over here and refresh the page. Yep. Okay. So 11, 12, 13. So that's all up and working. So I'm going to take a little bit of a break, grab some coffee, grab a little bit of food, and then I'm just going to basically create a second part. So I'm going to stop streaming, and then I'm going to start the stream back up again here in just a little bit once I get some food and drink in me, and then come back and we'll finish up this script and get the rest of this working. And then if we want to add some styling to this to kind of make it a little bit better, we'll do that as well. All right, guys, thanks.